Hi, I'm Mark, and this is My Electric Life. Now, after you've thought about insulation, the next thing to address your attention to is the source of your energy. Ideally, if you want to lower your carbon footprint, that means you're going to be looking for electricity that's generated from a renewable source like solar or wind. And there's really only two options here. The first is you can tick a box on your energy contract and your supplier will commit to providing a certain percentage of your electricity from renewable sources. I mean, that is a perfectly valid way to do it, but I have two objections. And the first is that it's quite expensive. So if you do the maths over a long period of time, if you're consuming that more expensive electricity over a number of years, you could probably afford to buy your own generator. In other words, put solar panels on your roof. And the other problem I have with it, I guess, is that you've only got the energy company's word that that electricity came from a renewable source. You can't actually tag the electrons and look at them as they flow out of the outlet and know where they came from. So I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit of a cynic, but I'm not convinced that it all comes from where they say it does. So I want to be really sure that my electricity is coming from renewables, and the best way to do that is to actually put your own generator on the roof of your house. In other words, solar panels. And the cost of solar panels has come down so much over the last decade that really you'd be crazy not to do it. The payback, well, in Australia anyway, the payback is going to be a few years, and given that the panels are usually warranted for at least 20 years, you're going to have many years of effectively free energy. So I would suggest that everybody in Australia, at least, who can afford it and has a roof, should put solar panels up there. So this is my solar generator here. Yes, it's my own solar farm on the roof of my house. And it's comprised of 22 monocrystalline silicon panels. Each one of those panels can generate 425 watts of power at peak, which means you only need to string together a couple of these panels and you can generate a kilowatt of power. That's peak power. So peak power, the rating on a panel, is only really achieved on a bright summer's day, and at other times they'll generate less than peak. And this comes into play when you actually have to design and size the system. One thing I like about these panels is that they're what they call frameless. Now that's a bit of a misnomer because they do actually have a frame, but the frame is black anodized aluminium rather than silver, and so it makes the panels a lot less conspicuous when you look up at the roof from the road. And a lot of people don't like panels on their roof because they think they're a bit of an eyesore. But if you get panels like this, these frameless ones, they're really not too noticeable and they blend in rather well with the roof. Before we talk about sizing and cost of PV systems, the other element that you need to know about is the inverter. And this inverter here is mounted on my garage wall. And the inverter basically, so the energy or electricity that comes out of a solar panel is DC, direct current. And of course your house runs, all your appliances run off AC current. So the DC current that comes out of the panels needs to be converted into AC current that can be used by your house. And the way you do that is you hook those panels up to an inverter. So all of the panel wires all come back into this inverter box here, and the inverter then converts it from DC to AC, which is usable electricity for your household appliances. And this inverter here is made by a company called Sungrow, and it's rated at 8 kilowatts. So the maximum it can process of energy or of power is 8 kilowatts. Now on my roof there, I actually have 9.5 kilowatts of panels. So at their peak, they can generate more electricity than this inverter can process. And you might think that's a bit strange, but I'll explain why that is in a moment. The other thing about the modern inverters, and this is what I call a modern one because it's only been installed in the last few months, is that there's no display on here there's just a light to tell you that it's active. On the old inverters, firstly, they would be much larger than this. Probably one capable of doing 8 kilowatts would be at least twice the size of this. But the other thing is that they would have had somewhere down here a little LCD display that tells you what's going on. You don't need that anymore because these are all Wi-Fi connected. So you can load the app onto your phone and you can see exactly what's going on with the inverter. You don't have to be standing there in front of it and looking at it, which is a great innovation. And this is a great little app because I can look at this now and it's showing me in real time what's going on. And I can see right now as I look at it that it's 25 degrees outside and my PV system is generating 6.2 kilowatts of energy right now. The maximum it can output is 8 kilowatts. It's a 3-phase inverter, so it actually puts that across 3 phases. I've had this house wired up for 3-phase for a few reasons that I won't go into at the moment. But that shows you the instantaneous situation in terms of energy. And there's another screen here that shows you the electricity that's been generated over time. So this is a power over time curve. And of course, as I mentioned in the introduction to this series, that power times time equals energy. And so this curve here shows you how much energy has been generated across the day. And you will typically always see a bell curve like this one here, because what happens if you think about it, the sun starts off low in the sky and you get a low amount of energy or electricity coming out of the panels, and then as the sun gets higher you get more electricity from them, and then they peak around midday and then they start going the other way. So you'll always get this classic bell curve when you look at your generation curve. But when I look at this, I can also see here that up till now, and it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, that I've produced, or my solar PV system rather, I haven't done anything, I've just talked to the camera. My solar system has generated so far 56.7 kilowatt hours, which is pretty good, especially given that my total consumption in a typical day is only about, for my household consumption, is probably a total of about 20 kilowatt hours. So that's more than double what I actually use. And that's significant because it comes into play when you're choosing the size of the system and how you match your load with your generation. Now, I mentioned earlier that my system has a rather peculiar design in as much as I have 9.5 kilowatts of peak power on the roof, but my inverter can only process 8 kilowatts of power. And you might think that's rather odd. Why would it be designed that way? Well, there's a good reason for this. And the reason is this: that peak energy output or peak power output of those panels is 9.5 kilowatts. But remember that that's only happens on a very few times in the year. In the middle of summer, when you've got bright skies, it's not too hot, and right in the middle of the day, you'll reach that peak. But for most other times, it'll be somewhere less than that. So if I just had 8 kilowatts of panels on the roof with an 8 kilowatt inverter, it means that inverter would only really be maxing out on rare occasions in the year, a few days maybe of the year, and the rest of the time it would be operating below its maximum. So by overloading it effectively and putting more panels on there, what will happen is at this time of the year where we're getting lots of sunlight, my generation will reach 8 kilowatts somewhere around 11 a.m. and it'll go above that and come back down the other side of that bell curve around 1 p.m. So what that means is the inverter will be getting an excess of power, and that's fine, it can cope with that, it just doesn't process the excess. And it will output 8 kilowatts for those several hours in the middle of the day. So what the result is that you finish up with a bell curve that sort of has a plateau on the top of it. So it'll come up to 8 kilowatts at 11 a.m. and then it'll flatten out and it'll start coming back down the other side of that bell curve after 1 p.m. And if you look at that curve, remember that when you're looking at a curve like that, that is a graph of power versus time, or power over time. And if you look at the area underneath that curve, that's energy. And it's energy that's worth money. So if you calculate the area under the curve with that plateau on it, you will get more energy than if it just peaks at 9 kilowatts briefly and then falls away. you will achieve less energy under the curve. And it's all about maximizing the energy that you get from the system. So this is a little trick that's known by most solar companies when they design systems. You don't need to be concerned about the complexities of it. If you choose a reputable installer, they will know about this and they will design accordingly for your particular needs. But I just thought I'd mention that because it's an interesting peculiarity, and if someone offers you a system that has more panel capacity than inverter capacity, you might get a bit concerned that maybe they're trying to oversell you or something. But no, that's actually a good design principle. Now, in terms of sizing the system, there's all sorts of calculations that can be done here, but in simple terms, you want a system that matches roughly your daytime electricity usage. And you can work out what that is fairly easily. If you look at your electricity bill, you can see how many kilowatt hours you've consumed each day on average. You can average it out over a month or a quarter. Probably a longer period is better, so a quarter bill or even 2 quarterly bills, and work out what your average usage is per day. And it depends on your household and your movements, but if you're a working family household where most people are out during the day, you'll find that at least 50% of your electricity will be nighttime usage. And the solar PV system, standalone as it is, can't really deal with that. It can only really deal with the daytime usage. So you might say, well, let's say it's 50%, then that's where I size my system. So for argument's sake, if you look at your bills and you determine that your average usage each day is 20 kilowatt hours, then you might say, well, 50% of that will be daytime, so that's 10 kilowatt hours. And so that's the size of system that I need, one that'll generate on average 10 kilowatt hours. And you can only work on averages here, particularly with sizing the PV system, because on a sunny day it'll generate more than on a wet day. It'll generate more on a summer's day than a winter's day, and you can't change the size of your system on a daily basis, so you need to work on an average. So if we take that 10 kilowatt hours as an average load, then if you're in a sunny part of Australia, that's probably going to mean that you need a system that's about 2.5, maybe 3 kilowatt system to cover that. And what that will do, it'll generate in the daytime a bit over 10 kilowatt hours. And so that'll cover your daytime usage. In terms of cost, one of the great things is the cost of solar PV has come down a huge amount over the last decade. And so, 10 years ago, you probably would have been paying about $3 a watt for an installed system. And today you can get them for a good quality system for as little as $1 a watt. There's even cheaper systems, but they're probably grey import panels and inverters, and I honestly wouldn't touch them, because what's important when choosing a PV system or the PV system supplier is to get it from a supplier who you can trust is going to be around to honour the warranty on that system. So don't just respond to a phone call from some random call centre. Look around, try and find a local supplier who's been in the business for some time and go with them. So nowadays you can get a decent system for $1 a watt, which means if you're going to install a 3 kilowatt system, that's going to cost you about $3,000, which is far cheaper than it used to be. And you'll get a pretty good payback on that. If you've sized it so it's covering your daytime usage, it'll probably pay itself off in 2 to 3 years. So that's not bad, because the panels have a 20-year warranty at least, and the inverter would have at least a 10-year warranty. So you're going to have many years of warranted usage where the energy that you're generating is effectively free, because after the 3rd year the system's paid for itself. So you can see that it makes a lot of sense to put solar on your house. It makes more sense than it does to tick that box on the energy contract and ask for renewable energy. If you have a roof and you own a home, you'd be crazy not to put solar panels on that roof. Now, not everybody can do that, because some people live in strata apartments and some people are renting. But if you have that as an option, it should be #1 option to do. There's a solar installer in my area who tells me that whenever a customer comes into his shop and wants to talk about batteries, he steers them in a different direction. He tells them that the return on investment on batteries is not great and that they're better off spending all of that extra money on more panels. Indeed, he suggests that they should cover their entire roof with panels because even at the lowest feed-in tariff of 5 cents a kilowatt hour, they'll still make a return on that investment over time. Well, is that right? Well, I'm not going to look at the return on investment for batteries in this video because I'll do that in a future video, but we can have a quick look at the ROI for rooftop solar. In the energy industry, when a proponent is proposing a new generator, they'll often refer to a metric called LCOE, levelized cost of energy. And simply put, LCOE is the lifetime cost of the generator divided by its lifetime output in kilowatt hours. And from that metric, you can come to a price per kilowatt hour that you can then use as a baseline for what you would need to sell the energy at to break even. Now, this is very easy to calculate, particularly for a home system. So let's have a look at that now in regards to our 3 kilowatt system we were talking about. I'm going to do this over 10 years, not 20 years. Even though the panels are warranted for 20 years, the inverter is usually only warranted for 10 years. And so to do a 20-year calculation, we'd need to factor in the cost of a replacement inverter at 10 years. And really, most people don't live in the same house for 20 years anymore, so it's probably not that relevant. So our upfront cost, as discussed, is $3,000. And I'm throwing in $500 for maintenance, which is really, there's zero maintenance required on a PV system other than the occasional cleaning of the panels. So that's really just to hose down the panels every few years. So our lifetime cost of the asset then would be $3,500. Now, if we look at the energy yield side of the equation, in my area, we have a lot of sunshine, so this system would actually produce 12.6 kilowatt hours each day, and I'm doing it very specifically for this area because this is where the claim was being made by a local installer. So yearly, you would yield 4,599 kilowatt hours, and over the 10 years, that's 45,990 kilowatt hours, or 45.9 megawatt hours. So our LCOE is basically $3,500 divided by 45,990, and that comes out at 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's what your base cost is for that energy. You would need to be achieving a higher feed-in tariff than 7.6 cents to actually break even on this investment. And with a minimum of 5 cents, you're actually going to be behind. So the claim doesn't actually stack up. However, there are many retailers that are offering in the marketplace more than 5 cents a kilowatt hour for feed-in tariff. Indeed, the one that I'm with, Origin, pays me 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you shop around, you could easily get a feed-in tariff that's higher than 7.6 cents. So in a way, he is right. However, you're betting that the feed-in tariffs will continue at the current level. And there's a lot of people, pundits, that believe that the cost of energy is going to go down. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but in the long term, there is so much new generation being built, it's likely we'll have an oversupply, and that will drive the feed-in tariffs down even lower than 5 cents. So it wouldn't be a safe bet to put all your investment into getting a payback from the feed-in tariff. So that's enough for now. I hope you found this information in this video useful, and if you have, maybe give me the thumbs up. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer any questions. And in the meantime, enjoy your electric life.